Hello there, welcome to this Rush Hour concert from the International Music Foundation. And if you haven't already, you still have 1 hour 45 minutes left to vote in the primary election. My name is Robbie Ellis. I cast my first ever US vote for this primary election. Yep, and I'm here to host a pre-concert talk for this Rush Hour concert. It's called Vignettes for Piano Quartet. There's a great variety of music. There's some Bernstein, there's some Mahler, there's a piece that was written just last year. Lots of different styles to intrigue you. Joining me on stage are two of the performers in today's concert and one of the composers. So first, MingHuan Xu is the violinist in this quartet. She's on the faculty of Roosevelt University, a busy freelancer in the area as well. She plays on a 1760 Nicolas Galliano instrument, which will become very relevant later in the talk. I suspect a number of you know why. Also on the stage next to MingHuan is Paul Novak. He is a PhD candidate at the University of Chicago. He received a Charles Ives Scholarship from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. As I said, PhD candidate studying with Augusta Reed Thomas, who is a composer who's been in this program before. He composed the quartet called Interlocutor. And finally, Anthony Devroye, former, current artistic director of this concert series, one of the two, busy freelance violist, member of the Avalon String Quartet. So, MingHuan, I'll come to you first, talking about the music of Gustav Mahler. Now, most of us will be used to thinking of Mahler as a grand symphonist, you know, huge orchestras and choirs, and not much of a chamber music composer, but this is his only surviving piece of chamber music.
Well, that's right. So you're absolutely right. So when we think of Mahler, we think of his big symphonic works that is very often larger than life. And this piano quartet, actually, he wrote it when he was very young. He was only 15 years old. So he didn't write his first symphony until he was in his late 20s. So when he was 15, he was actually enrolled in Vienna Conservatory as a piano student. And at the same time, he wrote a sonata for violin and piano, as well as a piano quintet, but those pieces did not survive. The piano quartet is the only piece that survived. And what's interesting about it is that it's only one movement, so that means it's incomplete. And so in one of his letters to his friends, he said he actually did not, mean to not complete. He just got distracted because he was just a kid. He, went on to do something more fun, I guess. But what's interesting about it, there is a second movement, which we're not playing because it's only 24 bars. And later on, Alfred Schnettke complete the second movement, but not in Mahler's style, in his own style, which is very often very disturbed, dark. So if you hear this work back to back, the first movement and second movement, it's somewhat jarring. There's a wonderful recording by Gideon Kramer and Andrus Labiz on YouTube. You can check it out. So it's a wonderful work, and the movement, it's very warm and very expansive and grand. You can already hear the hint of his composition style later in his life.
And does it remind you of any other composers who were around him at the time, or composers that came before him?
I would say probably there times remind us of Schumann and Brahms and extremely romantic style.
Yeah. So that is going to be the second piece on the program. We'll come back to the first one shortly. But after the Mahler is the piece by our guest composer here, Paul Novak. So Paul, your piece, Interlocutor, we'll talk about that in a second, but give us a bit of a background to yourself, how long you've been in Chicago, what brought you here, what sort of music you do.
Absolutely. So first of all, it's so lovely to be here for this Rush Hour concert. I have lived in Chicago for 2 years. I'm relatively new to the city because I moved here for grad school. And I also moved here in the middle of a pandemic, too, which as a composer, all the work that you do is sort of collaborative and social. You're always working with other people to make the art happen. And so it was a really hard time to move to the city, but especially since music has been happening again, since we're able to have in-person concerts like this, everyone has been so welcoming and inclusive, and it's just such an amazing city for music. A little bit about my background. So I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and I think like a lot of composers my age, I sort of had a very mixed musical upbringing where I had a very classical music side of things, where I'm a classical flutist. I played in orchestra. That's how I started composing. But I also grew up playing pop music and rock music and played in bands. And I think you'll hear in the piece today, which is very rhythmic and repetitive, it has a lot of influence from that style of music as well.
So in the classical music world, there's the genre of the written bio. The 100 words to 200 words that you put on your website, and quite often they're quite formulaic. And I like how you started yours. The first 3 words are rejecting grandiose narratives, comma, Paul Novak is a blah, 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 blah. So how do you reject grandiose narratives in the piece that we're going to hear today, Interlocutor?
That's a great question. It's very funny to hear that read out loud in the bio that has been in programs.
It's a format that's usually written for the page and very seldom read out loud.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that when we think about the history of Western classical music, Western art music, we tend to think about these solitary composers writing these masterworks that are these huge genius symphonic works, right? And I think
Gustav Mahler, perhaps.
Exactly, like Mahler, exactly. But my experience as a composer has been so much more about the collaborative work with other people. And in particular, I'm really interested in sort of decentering myself from the compositional process. And so a huge part of that has been writing music that prioritizes the kind of collective nature of composition. And I think this piece, Interlocutor, really showcases that. It's collectively virtuosic in a huge number of ways, in that it really prioritizes the artistic teamwork of the ensemble. It's very conversational, so I think you'll hear it's about kind of these interruptions over
Hence the title.
and over again. Exactly.
Yep.
And it's also sort of a pun, too, because one of the kind of ideas that comes back throughout the piece is this idea that we call a rhythmic hocket, which is where the different parts fit together, sort of like a puzzle. They're interlocking. And so it's sort of a pun on that as well. I like to talk a lot about the idea of collective virtuosity, so that what makes my music really difficult is not the individual parts, it's how they fit together. And in this piece, which is probably the hardest piece I've ever written, I think you'll really hear that virtuosity come out. And this is such an all-star group of musicians. They are absolutely killing it. So I'm really excited for you to hear Interlocutor.
Lastly, a facetious question. There's a lot of twinkly textures in this piece. Is that inspired by Reno, Nevada slot machines?
Sorry, say that again?
Is that inspired by the slot machines from your hometown?
Sure, I think it is.
Let's go. That's now the official story. Yeah. All right. So Anthony, violist in this quartet. After Paul's piece, we're going to hear some Canadian folk music. What's all this about?
Right. Well, as you alluded to early on, the big attraction to this program is just the tremendous variety in styles between the different pieces. Ordinarily, a piano quartet program will feature some Brahms or some Schumann or some Dvorak or a big piece that just completely dominates the program. Of course, for Rush Hour Concerts, for the concert format that we know and love here, we're taking the chance to play some shorter pieces so that we could fit all these different styles on one program. So we were looking for short works that showcased a wide variety of musics. So as we move from the grandiosity of the Mahler to the anti-grandiosity of Paul's piece, the next piece is just a little bit of a walk in the park, just has a sweet simplicity, sweet understated quality to it. Julie Doiron is a folk singer from Canada. And she wrote a song. You have the text to the song. You're not actually going to hear the text, but it's there for your reference, because this piece is an arrangement of Julie's song. She's a singer-songwriter, a folk songwriter. And this small piece that she wrote that was arranged for piano quartet was part of a much larger project commissioned by an ensemble called Ensemble Made in Canada. It's a slightly cumbersome name, but they are a piano quartet based in Canada, and they commissioned 14 different composers to compose short piano quartets, one from each of the 14 provinces of Canada. They are a Canadian group. So the violist in that group is an old friend of mine. She and I were talking. She mentioned this project that she had worked on with her group. I said, hey, I've got this concert coming up. We've got room for a few more minutes of music. What can we pull from this 14-piece project that would complement and fit into this already eclectic and interesting grab bag of piano quartet pieces? So we selected this piece, which, as I said, is a bit of a break after the hyper-complex focus of Paul's piece and the 10 straight minutes of counting every single beat that passes by that we're all doing up, where we get to just release a little bit and enjoy this very simple tune.
From focus to folk. Right. And after that, Joaquín Turina, Spanish composer who studied in France, and his piano quartet doesn't wear the Spanishness on its sleeve totally explicitly, but very quickly, what's that work going to be like, the finale of the program?
It's very dramatic. It's great fun to play. It moves in small episodes. We have material from the opening movement that gets revisited in the other two movements. I think Turina uses this a lot, this idea of cyclical appearances of the musical material that he works with. So it kind of ties the whole piece together, 3 different movements, but with common elements between them, and just very colorful, incredibly beautiful, lush harmonies. I think Turina is kind of the perfect summer festival music. It's just really ravishingly beautiful. You don't have to spend your whole evening listening to it. It's just, kind of compactly structured and just very characterful and a real joy to play.
Beautiful. I will ask you to hand the microphone back to MingHuan, because we've discussed the music on today's concert, and there's something else to discuss, a rollicking yarn of a violin gone walkabouts. So, now that we've talked about the music, MingHuan, would you tell us what happened on May the 11th of this year?
Well, this is May 11th, a little bit more than a month ago. There people came into our house in the middle of the night and took my instrument, and along with another violin and then the cello. So that evening at 3:30 in the morning, we lost 3 instruments, including my antique Italian violin.
So you play on a 1760 Nicolas Galliano. He was a violin maker in Naples, heavily influenced by the grand master himself, Antonio Stradivari. Can you give a bit of the history of your particular instruments? 260 years, is that my maths right? Yeah, 260 years old now.
Yes.
And the history of it and how you came to be playing on it.
Well, it's such a good question. Well, I have been playing on this instrument for more than 20 years. A friend of mine and I, we went to Northwestern University together, and she was a flutist, and in her family, there was this violin. So she came up to me one day, she's like, my father has this violin, would you like to play on it? I believe it's from her grandpa and grandfather, and came from Europe, obviously. I don't know the exact history of it, but, I do feel that, sometimes I wonder about the same question. It's how many violinists have played on this instrument, and it's such a luck for the instrument itself to survive for so long. And when that happened, and I was so heartbroken that I didn't want to be the person who lost the instrument, So, yeah, it was a very difficult moment in our lives.
So you had some concerts that you had to fulfill, and you played on a loaner instrument. So what was it like to play on a loaner instrument when you'd been playing this one antique instrument for basically your whole career?
Well, it's I was very grateful that I had a loaner instrument from Darnton and Hirsch, but again, it's like a musical partner, that I've had for so many years. And as much as I enjoy playing on that loaner violin, it wasn't the violin that I knew, and there's certain colors that I couldn't, that I had in mind, but I couldn't achieve on that violin. But that violin was great, but I just missed my violin every single day. Yeah.
And in a classic 3-movement structure, we've got the setup, we've got the sad middle, and then we're going to have the joyous final movements. So tell us the story of how you got it back.
Well, I was in my family, Winston and I and the kids were in West Coast, actually. We're in a music festival, just wrapping up the last concert. And that morning, our detectives called saying that we have 3 instruments. We want you to come back immediately to identify them. So I took a red-eye flight, and I came back, and in police station there were 3 instruments, and they were not damaged, unharmed, and they were there. Somebody turned them in. So to us, it's still very much a mystery who that person that turned the instruments in and what happened to those instruments the last month.
So a complete mystery, but perhaps sometimes ask no questions, get it back unharmed. I am very happy for you that that you got the instrument back.
That was the best ending we could hope for. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this concert that's starting in just under 15 minutes' time is the first public outing of the instrument since its journey to parts unknown. And you're going to be starting with a special violin feature.
Yes, it's a piece called Somewhere Fantasy for Violin and Piano. Actually, it's composed and transcribed by my husband, Winston Choi. He wrote it for me, and in this piece, there is Bernstein's West Side Story Somewhere, and also Somewhere Over the Rainbows. My children grew up with that song and one of their favorite songs, along with other tunes. So he did so brilliantly intertwine all these melodies together, and they just organically sound beautiful together.
A very fitting return to the public stage for your instrument. Thank you so much. Before I wrap this pre-concert talk up, just a couple of notices about upcoming concerts. Tomorrow, the Dame Myra Hess Memorial Concert at the 17th Church of Christ Scientists, about a mile that way, features the Aya Piano Trio. They're playing Arvo Pärt and Clara Schumann's music. That's going to be live in person at the 17th Church of Christ Scientists, plus live on WFMT. And then the next Rush Hour concert right here, a week from today, another trio of different form. We've got clarinet, cello, and piano, Sarah Manasra, Zachary Prusel, and Catherine Peterson. Music by Louise Farronc and Johannes Brahms. But for now, today's Rush Hour concert is going to start in just over 10 minutes, so please join me in thanking MingHuan Xu, Paul Novak, and Anthony Devroye. Welcome to this rush hour concert, Vignettes for Piano Quartet here in St. James Cathedral in Chicago. I'm Robbie Ellis. This concert is presented by the International Music Foundation, which is grateful for support from the Claire, Rush Hour Concert's exclusive media sponsor, the National Endowment for the Arts and the Illinois Arts Council. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of composer Paul Novak here today, whose piece you'll hear, Interlocutor. Today's performers include violist Anthony Devroye and cellist Nicholas Photinos, but for now, please welcome pianist and composer Winston Choi and violinist MingHuan Xu.